they probably will not be in your business in 3 years. Unless
pretend we're something we're not, or to try and attract the best talent, and you're like
prioritizing on personality versus skill set.
If you're reaching out to network when you're looking for a job, you're too late.
You can end up spending more money trying to find someone you can underpay.
You're going to miss lots of stuff.
If you don't do that up front, it will cost you.
No one wins. Hi, and welcome to What the FTE, the podcast where we cut through the noise and talk about what's really happening in HR, hiring, and the future of work. I'm Melissa Marcellison, head of people and culture here at Certain. Super excited to be guest hosting again today. Today on What the FTE, I'm joined by Marianne Bulger from True Executive Search. Over the last decade, Marianne's worn just about every hat in the tech world: founder, investor, community builder, and now executive search partner. She's bringing clarity, honesty, and a people-first mindset to how we build better teams. Today, we're exploring how the best exec teams get built and where they trip up. Marianne, so excited to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Melissa. This is such an honor. I have immense respect for your company, having worked together, and I'm excited about these topics. I know we're going to be really honest and dive right into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get to it. When it comes to hiring execs, what are good companies quietly shooting themselves in the foot over?
I think that no matter what, whether it is an executive placement or an IC engineering placement, anything, not getting full alignment internally on what it is you're looking for, why you're looking for it, who you're looking for, and what they need to bring to the table. If you don't do that up front, it will cost you. It'll cost you in time, process, frustration, money if you're investing in a search process, and even just money if you're wasting time on it. So I would say that's number one. I also think creating unrealistic expectations of what you want, finding the purple squirrel, if you will, feel that you can make the scorecard and job description. You can't always make the market. Setting yourself up for success on what's realistic for that hire. Over or under hiring for skill set. So hiring someone that hasn't done the job that you need them to do, or hiring someone that has done a job, but at such a high scale that they wouldn't know how to get into the weeds of the position you're in. What that looks like practically is, let's say you're a $10 million ARR business. You've got 50 employees. You need to hire a chief product officer who's seen where you're going. And if you hire someone who's only seen $100 million business or plus, multi-product organization, buy-side M&A growth strategy, and that's not what you need, you're misaligning. Similar to if you hire someone who's maybe never seen 10 million plus, has only seen the 0 to 1 phase, you might be making a big risk. So I would say that's a huge piece. And then also just over prioritizing on personality versus skill set. I see that a lot.
Oh, interesting.
At the end of the day, not really being able to differentiate between the candidates you're looking at, aside from how they would fit in with the personalities of your team, that I think you run a huge risk of, for you selecting the wrong person.
Awesome. I feel like there's so much there that we can get to. I think even that, like all of that we could talk about too for probably half an hour, right? But really interesting when you brought up like the clarity of what you're looking for early on. I think working with your team, that was super helpful for us, because sometimes you think you're aligned and you think you all know what you're looking for. And until you get people who really know what they're doing, asking those smart questions and digging just a little bit deeper, like that was, I think, a game changer for us.
Mm-hmm. Yes. The right teams are willing to look at a broader spectrum of candidates. Knowing what your bullseye might be, your perfect purple squirrel, it's okay to dream about what you want, but understanding what the sort of various concentric circles look like beyond that bullseye. What are you willing to flex on? That means that you can, as an executive team and a hiring team, see the spectrum of opportunity, see different characters come to the table, and understand once you get into market that what you think you're looking for might actually shift based on the conversations you're having. Ultimately, you're hiring a human as well, not a job description. And so the right person and the skill set that they bring to the table and the gaps that they might have could actually sway you in a different direction.
Absolutely. The other thing that you said in there, I think ties actually into that too, is that culture fit. I have such a hard time with that term and trying to get people to think about, I'd say culture add versus culture fit. But when you hear a client saying they want culture fit, what do you think is often going on underneath? Like, what are we looking for when we use that term?
Right. I think we all have a hard time with it. The most obvious answer is obviously someone who aligns to the core values of the business and their team and their working style. But what does that actually mean? I think what we see most often play out in a search is someone with true executive presence, like a professional, someone who can show up
Mhm.
authentically as themselves, who knows what they're looking for, who can clearly articulate that, who can express curiosity, and has a clear demonstration to communicate effectively. I actually think that that is one of the underlying most important features of culture that is woven throughout all of our search work. Probably the messier side of what people want with culture fit is kind of what I had indicated before, like a specific personality that aligns to the personalities of the executive team, the existing executive team, and a bit of fear around hiring the wrong personality or someone that would rock the boat, or worst case scenario is like a best friend. I do think that many leaders want to be able to hire someone that they can be very honest with, but it does come up when folks say culture fit, they really want someone that can be their friend.
Yeah, someone that's going to agree with them, think like them, be able to move quick, those kinds of things. When we look at the other side of that, because I always try and really challenge that too, is, we want to be able to work together and it to be like a good place to be. But if we all think the same, yeah, we might move really fast, but we're going to miss lots of stuff. Where's the other side of that? What's that line between hiring someone who will maybe be that voice in the room that won't agree or challenge the status quo versus someone that's just hard to work with?
Right. Confidential references. It comes up in almost every single recruitment process. We've met someone, they seem fantastic, but they don't look like us. They don't talk like us. Their personality might clash. We're worried about this. And I think that the best way to draw that line and, come to a decisive point on whether or not you think they would be value add or disruptive is to have conversations with people who have worked with them. Fortunately or unfortunately, relying on them to provide those references doesn't always give you a clear line of sight to what really went on in a workplace that they might have been involved in, someone that reported to them, someone they reported to. And so I think, confidential references are a unspoken part of this work and this line of work that we have to be really careful about, but also can be one of the most value add parts.
Yeah, absolutely. And then like that judgment in there to go, right. We all hear things. These communities are generally small, whatever industry or background you're in.
Yeah.
I know when we were having conversations, we had some of our team doing their own back channels at the same time. And then you kind of touched on that, like you don't know who you're going to get, right? What was that dynamic? And how do you pull apart, is this a pattern or is this maybe that was just two people that didn't work well together? That happens, right? So
Yeah.
sounds daunting.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I made a hire once that was so scary. Was someone that was so culturally misaligned to the existing team that we had built. And I remember I was replacing myself in this role, and I was sitting in a meeting afterwards with the person I reported to, and that individual said to me, "Marianne, I'm scared because I know we need to hire this person, but I am afraid of what it's going to do for the bond we've created as a team and our team dynamic." And it was the best hire I've ever made in my career, and changed the way I understand hiring, because not only did I get the confidence from those confidential references that this person was as outstanding at what they do as they were, but we also managed that pretty heavily, like fronted it with the team. Like, this person doesn't talk like us. They have a very different approach, but they are going to be value add. And that was the absolute best, most high performing team I've ever worked for. And that individual made us so. Like, they brought a new energy, enthusiasm, honesty, bluntness, which at first was jarring and then was hilarious and fun. I just think it's really important to think outside the box in that respect. Like, you may be good, you may be great, but are you outstanding yet? Like, is this the high performing sports team that you want to be on? So you win the Stanley Cup. This is very timely because I think we have like a do or die game for the Oilers tonight, which is going to date this podcast.
That's right. I think that's super interesting, kind of what you were digging into. And what I was thinking as you were sharing that is that it must be just as important for a leadership team to know who they are, or the hiring executive to know and be transparent with what it feels like to work here. I think that a lot of times we all get into sales mode if we just want to get this great hire. Do you find people are able to do that? Like, are they sharing what it's like to work there, knowing that that's going to help them find a really good match?
To clarify, you're saying teams really want to just find and get the job done.
Even like that holy grail talent, like you said, sometimes you're over hiring, maybe because of some of the logos that they've got on their resume or whatever it might be on their LinkedIn. Are you taking the time? Are organizations or executive teams good at sharing with you what it looks like to work here? Like, what does it look like to be a part of this team? Or as part of that, even just you spending time with them probably gives you a bit of a feel too.
Correct. I like to spend more time, I think, than the average person in the business up front, do a bit of a listening tour, try and talk to my clients, because ultimately any search team is just an extension of your team. That's why you're hiring them.
Right.
You don't have the capacity or expertise, but the reason you're bringing them in is because they are going to become you. And in order to become you and represent you well, they need to know the good, the bad, and the ugly. And be able to sell that honestly to someone. Like, this is what I think is really interesting. And I say to most candidates in conversations, like, let's put the rose-colored glasses on. Let's talk about what's like so shiny and interesting about this. And then let's take them off. And let's talk about what's messy and what needs to improve and how you can contribute to that. Too often, if I can come back to your question, too often companies are trying to sell themselves to me up front. And certain things start to uncover themselves as the process unfolds. And it's much easier as your partner if, any search partner knows all of that up front and can really level set. And that'll make the process more honest, speedy, efficient. But not everyone wants to open up the closet.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know a lot of times when I even talk to people as they're they are candidates, like going out to have those conversations. It's like, my best advice is always, the more you can be in that moment, then you won't get to a place where, you're in the organization and you're going like, oh, this isn't really what I wanted. And they're looking at you of like, you're not really what I wanted either, because you've put on this show. I think us, when we're hiring, we have that can happen too, right? Where we pretend we're something we're not, or to try and attract the best talent. And you're like, why are you not looking for the thing that's going to work for you?
A few things you can do to always mitigate that. I mean, number one, from day one, I always say, clients, candidates, anyone I'm working with, hiring is a two-way street. Both people have to fully want this. This has to be a full fuck yes at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Both people, or both parties, I should say. And in order to get there, it sometimes means that you can set a really great process, but you might need to augment it to make sure everyone has the answers that they're looking for. Because the last thing you want to do is sell someone a different bag of goods. They show up.
Yeah.
They all of a sudden are 6 months into the job. They feel like the wool was pulled over their eyes. They thought it was one thing and it turned out to be the other. No one wins in that.
No one wins. Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's shift gears a little bit and talk recruiters. What separates a transformational search partner from a transactional one?
I think a transformational search partner is someone who is really bought into the vision of your business and why you're hiring for this person and agrees with you. Doesn't just want to get a paycheck, but really understands why you're trying to do this and is invested in helping you find the absolute best answer. Everyone will tell you that, but it's the kind of person that goes above and beyond to advise you on how you're thinking about the search, to push you and push your boundaries on who it is they think you should meet with, is willing to create space for experimentation up front, saying like, I'm going to show you a bunch of different profiles. Let's figure out what feels right. Someone who's patient in the process, if things don't go right, they don't get demotivated. They know how to motivate their teams. I do think someone that has depth of expertise in that market matters. It's not just about how fast they can get to someone, but also just having an honest lens and not setting up the search for failure by telling you they can hire for something that they can't. I think that that's probably the differentiator. It's just a human who cares. It really is. It's a human who cares, maybe cares too much at the end of the day.
I think that's so great to hear because, when we're hiring executives, having been through the process, we care. We care a lot because you touched on before, the dynamics of our team, like all of those things are going to be impacted whether we're successful long-term or not. So I think having a partner who legitimately cares about your success, you can feel it. You can tell, we're just trying to get this off the books as fast as possible.
One thing I like about our firm, and one of the reasons I decided to join this firm, is that we're measured against an NPS score, not on billables. That question specifically around, what differentiates someone who's transactional and not. It's someone who's driven towards the best success outcome and the highest client satisfaction, not someone who's driven to just get another line item on their paycheck.
Right.
But many firms are structured that way. It's about volume of billables versus the opposite. And I think that might be the toxic trait of recruitment, frankly.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is a podcast for HR professionals. So I think we well know what gets measured gets done.
Yeah.
It's cliche, it's old, but it's true.
And ask
if that's what you're saying is important, then that's what's important.
Correct.
Right?
Ask it when you're trying to hire a recruiter, how do you measure success as a firm?
Right.
And if they stumble, don't give you, it should just be client satisfaction.
Have you ever seen an exec team become so homogenous that it's quietly stopped growing? And what are the signs when you're seeing that start to creep in?
Right. This is a hard question. I would say probably the protection around personality and culture, like a fear of change. Usually the signs can be dysfunction in the executive team, high turnover. As a result, the team just starts to represent itself out of fear of making another risky hire. I did a search like that recently, which was quite challenging because the search became heavily contingent on how that person's personality would play versus the skills they brought to the table. I also think sometimes there are so many benefits to building a bootstrapped business. And then there are a lot of drawbacks. If the business itself is not being pushed by a board who is advising them and has oversight on what the executive team looks like, or pushed for growth, there's no motivation to necessarily make change happen. So I think those are probably two signs and circumstances that I would see for that.
That makes a lot of sense. Any kind of tips or tricks for those maybe doing internal hiring or bringing someone in, when the executive team has that maybe bad taste in their mouth because someone convinced them to take a risk and now they're assigning that pass or fail to one specific human, and maybe aren't as willing to take that risk the next time.
You're saying someone who might have had a bad experience with a recruiter?
Yeah, or someone pushed them outside their comfort zone a bit, challenged them to do something they weren't thinking of doing, and it didn't work, right? It's great when it works. You open people's minds, but sometimes it doesn't work, right? How do you get them to do it again?
I feel like that question could apply to most life in general.
Life, yeah.
It's just a trust building exercise. I'll only move as quick as you want to move. Let's build the relationship first. Let's set the expectations. Let's make sure we're aligned. Probably over communication as well. If you're running that process internally and you feel like you don't have that trust from that individual, if you're looking externally, just heavily referencing someone, sure, and asking them for that to understand how they work. Search at the end of the day is such a human business, despite all of the AI augmentation that's popping up. It really does come down to the person, not necessarily the firm. But everyone's been burned by a recruiter at some point. There's too many factors at play to necessarily put the blame on a single person, I would say.
Absolutely. How do you create an executive team? So we talked about what it looks like when there's too much same, but how do you create a team that's greater than the sum of its parts? And what do you see your role in that being?
Creating an executive team that is greater than the sum of its parts is creating a world-class executive team. To me, that reads as a team that punches above its weight. It usually is a combination of factors, a high degree of accountability to one's peers and leaders, like really feeling connected, a clear line of sight on the strategic vision of the business and where you're going, and alignment that everybody is moving in that direction. Also, a clear line of sight and understanding of what they want to learn and their area of growth. I think anyone punching above their weight is sitting with a toolkit and knows all of the white space around them that they have to learn and grow, and feels that it is not only possible, but they are being cheered on by their colleagues to step into that space and play in that space and experiment and fail in that space as well. I think that level of psychological safety and psychological meaningfulness really is where you see these executive teams, these all-star executive teams working. It's like a bit of, we all know where we're going and we all believe in each other, accountable to one another, and we also believe that we need to fail to succeed. A lot of learning and experimentation.
And patience and forgiveness, like all of that stuff, like to maintain that trust, even when things don't go right, to maintain that, like, I legitimately believe in this person. That's, I think, a lot easier said than done, but so needed in those moments for sure. What would you say is, in your view, some of the qualities that predict whether an executive will thrive in a role years down the line? What are the signs that you see early?
Oh, okay. This one is probably similar, actually, to the last question, which is if you hire someone today that's done absolutely everything that you are asking them to do already, and there's nothing for them to learn, they probably will not be in your business in 3 years. Unless 3 years from now, you've grown so big that there's all these new problems for them to solve that they've never seen. Folks that end up landing and staying in roles for 3 years or more are the ones that have continuous opportunity to learn and support to do so from their leaders and colleagues. It also involves clear alignment on day one. They also have to show up in that respect. It's a bit 50% on them and 50% on the company. They need to know where they want to be going in order to feel confident that choosing your company and coming to join, like, do the job that you've set out for them is interesting enough for them to stick around. That's part of it. And it's also on the company to be really clear in articulating what the job is, where you want them to go, and listening to them also, not assuming that leaders are the only ones that have to listen to their direct reports about the changes that they might want to make in their career. We see a lot of like cross-functional change in leadership where someone might step into one role and shift into another position. Very commonly see engineering leaders who want to start owning product, or is a great example. I think sales folks who want to step into revenue and start owning like marketing, customer success, etc. Creating room for them to articulate that and that vision in your business, because they're not going to want to stay in the same job doing the same thing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think kind of in the same vein, like, what is the process, I guess, behind deciding how you put forward someone when it is that kind of stretch opportunity? Maybe it's their first time in a formal exec position, or someone, we started at the beginning going, you don't want to overhire, you don't want to underhire. In our industry, in tech and startup, and there's only so many of those folks that have been there at that exact moment, right? Your options sometimes are limited. How do you stretch a hiring team to say, like, this is how we could look outside of the box a little bit and maybe find something that we wouldn't have found otherwise?
Right. I actually think the answer to this is really simple. It's everything you were looking for, but in someone who's just done it in a number 2 seat. If you're hiring for a C-suite person, you're looking for someone who has done it before as the number 2 to a great C-suite individual. Let's say we're looking for a CMO. You look for a VP of marketing. someone who's done it under someone who's best in class. You want to look for great pedigree in that respect, not pedigree in logos, but in best in class operations in that function, and done it long enough that they are fully ready for that role. And the same would be true if you're looking to hire a VP, look at the director level and be willing to consider that person's potential. I think it's one of the best ways. It's one of the smartest ways to hire if you're willing to think outside the box and think about potential too. Coming back to the previous question, someone who's going to stay in your business for 3 years is someone who has that room to grow. Someone who was a director into a VP, and they know that they would spend 2 years really honing their craft as a VP and would one day want to step into that C-suite role. Creating the roadmap for them and the upward mobility, I think, is important.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think it sparks another question for me from the other side. I think I speak to people all of the time who are waiting for their turn because they have worked next to that best in class person, and maybe there's been promises made, maybe there's a development plan there. How do you talk to candidates about when it's time to maybe make a move to get that opportunity or to see something different versus waiting it out? I hear about people waiting it out all of the time.
Just waiting for the opportunity to show up on their doorstep, right?
Without having to move, right? Without I'm just going to take my boss's seat or I'm going to take that next seat.
I mean, wait it out if you have a clear line of sight on, and your team is being really clear to you that, your boss is going to move into this other job. And it's a bit of an empty promise sometimes, but any person sitting in their own seat would know clearly how certain that is, all puns intended. What I advise to a lot of folks is, if you're thinking about your career and have a clear line of sight on where you want to go, start building mentors outside of your organization. Don't reach out to them for a job. Find something that they've written online. Reach out to them and say, I read this article. I listened to that podcast. I watched that YouTube video. I attended this event and you were on stage. I would love 20 minutes of your time to hear more of your story and what advice you'd give to yourself in the past about how you got there. It's one of the best ways to get those mentors and peer mentors in your circle, just to learn from what best in class looks like and how to start thinking about stepping beyond the organization. I also advise a lot of folks that we have kind of lost the plot on the apprenticeship model and how valuable.
Yeah, that's some great advice. I talk to people a lot often too of if you're reaching out to network when you're looking for a job, you're too late, right? The ideal is to be building relationship genuinely, right? Like you said, this is someone I'm interested in getting to know, I think I could learn from, and just be genuine and authentic in that reach out. We come to you, right? We come to search firms when we have a critical role to fill. We don't often go to market, right? So it's, who is already in mind because you've been having conversations, who are you talking to? I'm sure you reach out to people I'm not interested, but I know someone, right? Those are those conversations that have to happen ahead of time because once, the job is out there, it's a lot of times too late, right?
Oh, on the opposite end of the spectrum, if you don't want to have to hire an executive search firm, be proactive about what you're going to be hiring for in the future and have your CEO or executive team start building those relationships. You might be an early stage business today, and for example, that one day you're going to have to hire a CFO. Or you might be a later stage business and you're going to have to hire a CFO that's gone public and seen an IPO. Start building those relationships with those targets today, because when the time comes when you need them and you meet with them on a quarterly or biannual basis for that coffee or that lunch, and you have that rapport established and you say, I think I'm ready to hire you, you can skip the whole search process if you've already aligned. Right. And I think that having the foresight to know where you're going and to leverage those leaders today as advisors and hopefully one day as hires, it requires an investment of time, largely from your CEO.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. This question kind of feeds on that too. What are the other roles that a CEO should play in hiring execs? And when should they actually get out of the way? It's not about that.
Okay. That was a good one. I mean, most importantly, especially on the executive hiring front, if this is someone that reports to the CEO, defining being involved in that search process is critical. Do not delegate hiring an individual that you will ultimately be like that will ultimately report to you to someone else. I think that the CEO needs to be involved in defining the role, needs to be involved in setting the bar for quality and culture, needs to be visible and engaged to attract that talent and make them feel like they have the trust and ear of that CEO, then they're not, at arm's reach. I think partnering closely with the hiring manager and the recruiting team on the process and making sure that it's moving smoothly. I think the CEO ultimately makes the final call on the hire and needs to. And then also knowing when to trust your team. Like, even if this person is going to report to you, if you have no experience in that area, it's not a weakness. It's a strength to say, I need to call on the rest of the team to make sure, or this person, it doesn't always have to be a direct report. It could be someone with very specialized experience that can provide that perspective to you. I think getting out of the way is probably, more about over-indexing on personal chemistry. You've got to get out of the way when it seems like that's the thing that's mattering to you more than the skills people are bringing to the table. Micromanaging the process. You probably have an HR leader on your team that is managing that process. Don't over manage it. You don't need to own every single step. And then again, it comes down to specialization. If you don't know something like a technical domain or a specific domain, maybe this is the first time you're hiring for that role and you feel like a fish out of water, you can not only call on your executive team, but if you have investors or anyone in your network, talk to someone who's in that job today and bring them into the process or into the thinking to making sure that you are hiring for the right person. I would index on the CEO should be more involved than less involved than they think.
Right.
In building executive teams.
And if there's getting out of the way to do it, sounds like getting out of their own way when it comes to some of the personality stuff, maybe some bias, things like that, more than actually not being in the process.
Yes.
Well, we're just about out of time. I want to ask one more question, especially thinking of our audience who are people. So say someone doesn't have a recruiter. Maybe they've been burned, maybe there's no budget, lots of reasons, but they still need to make a really great senior leader or exec hire. What's your best advice?
Aside from what I said before about proactively developing relationships, that's the easiest way to not have to hire a recruiter, is to think in the future. This is kind of a summary of our conversation today, but, having a very clear definition of what you want. So leveraging the existing professionals in your network who do that job to help you set realistic expectations on the scope, location, compensation, all of those pieces, getting full alignment internally. Don't waste your time if everyone has a different idea of what this person needs to do or why you would be hiring for this. Create a scorecard based on all of that information you're getting. This seems so rudimentary, but I think that it often doesn't get done because people sort of sprint to try and find a solution, and keep everyone accountable to that North Star. We all agreed this is what we wanted. This is the scorecard. This is how we're evaluating everyone. And continue to come back to that. I would say mapping the market early in the process, starting with that bullseye candidate, that purple squirrel, that dream candidate you would want, but be realistic about what are must-haves and nice-to-haves, and then be prepared to move outwards, whether it's location or industry or leveling, as we talked about. As you go through the process, so that you can have your map ready and then, start to go after those candidates as you start to stretch a little bit. Just over communicate with the candidates, with your team, stay on top of it, make sure everyone's aligned, leverage your network for referrals, probably from day one. This is what we're looking for. Here's the scorecard. Do you have anyone in your network that looks like this? And then lastly, just pay market rate. You can end up spending more money trying to find someone you can underpay than just paying what folks are worth. If you don't pay someone what they're worth, they're going to turn out of your business too quickly, and you'll end up spending time on that process again and that hire and whatnot. So,
yeah. Well, what a great way to wrap up. That's your checklist. You've got it everything you need right there to think about how you're attacking your next hire. So that's it for today's episode of What the FTE. Huge thanks, Marianne, for being here with me and sharing your experience and insights. If you did find this helpful, don't forget to check out the show notes below. There's a link to our Insights newsletter with exclusive access to the research, tools, and frameworks that we always mention on the show. Hit subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Until next time, it's been Melissa Marcellison, guest hosting for What the FTE.